Good evening. I'd like to call the City of North Augusta special call City Council meeting for October the 28th, 2024 to order. We're going to jump right in with our roll call going from my left, please.
Eric Presnell.
David McGee.
Pat Carpenter.
Britton Williams.
Jennifer McCauley.
David Buck.
Kevin Toole.
All right, we're jumping right into new business. We have two items. The first, administration resolution number 2024-50, confirming contracts entered into by the City of North Augusta with Southern Disaster Recovery, SDR, for debris removal and with Tetra Tech, Inc. for monitoring services related to such debris removal. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution? All right, Ms. Carpenter, second. Mr. Presnell, thank you. And anything you'd like to share about this, Ms. Clifford?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So just to kind of walk the dog for you on kind of the actions that occurred, obviously the governor of the state of South Carolina requested from the federal government a state of emergency, FEMA declaration, if you will. And in addition to that, Mayor Williams made a declaration for a state of emergency here within the city limits. And when the mayor sets a state of emergency, that allows for the city administrator, whoever that may be at the time, to waive certain formalities associated with the procurement process. Normally what we do is we buy things off of state contract or HGAC buy or some other cooperative purchasing agreement, or we go out to bid for three separate bids and get the lowest bid and proceed in that kind of way. Based on the emergency situation that we faced, based on Hurricane Helene, and in consultation with the mayor, ended up having dialogue with Aiken County's administrator and Chairman Bunker and a number of other officials within Aiken County, and decided from a strategy perspective that we were going to move forward together as a county, and that County of Aiken has an existing contractual relationship with SDR and Tetra Tech, and understand that you need two separate contractors to be able to do the debris removal work. So you actually have one contractor, in this case SDR, that does removal, and then you have a different contractor, in this case Tetra Tech, that does the monitoring, which meets the FEMA requirements, which allows you to be reimbursed. So those two have to go together. It doesn't have to be those two companies per se, but you need two companies in order to do something that requires for FEMA reimbursement if you go with outside city personnel or government personnel. And so because Aiken County had an existing contract vehicle with SDR and with Tetra Tech, both the city of Aiken and our city, City of North Augusta, entered into subcontracts, if you will, off an intergovernmental agreement using their contract pricing and their contract vehicle, and allow us to do that to move forward. We also got some additional information from FEMA. FEMA does not allow what they call piggybacking contracts. So a piggyback contract would be, let's say, for example, we saw that the city of Augusta, Georgia had a contract that we thought was favorable. We go, hey, we like that contract, and we're just going to copy paste that contract and make it ours, and we're going to just do that. That's called piggybacking. That's not allowed by FEMA. However, because of the way that Aiken County entered into their agreements with SDR and Tetra Tech, which allowed for an intergovernmental allowance, if you will, a procedure for subunits of government, i.e. the cities, to enter into those contracts, that does not meet the piggybacking definition, and FEMA will then allow it. So we have a document from FEMA telling us that they believe this is a legal way to enter into a contract. And so because of that, I signed contracts on behalf of the city with both SDR and Tetra Tech to allow them to begin work within the city limits on city-controlled roads. And I've given you a briefing previous about the difference between SCDOT and city roads. And so this contract is strictly for city roads, not county roads, but city roads that are in the city limits of North Augusta. And so that's what this is allowing us. And so this resolution, based on Kelly's advice and consent, was that this would allow for you as the council to be delivered, if you will, in the minutes, the actual contract documents that I signed on behalf of the city, and for you to validate that decision that the city felt it was in the best interest to move forward with these two contractors nested within Aiken County to do storm debris removal with these two companies. And so that's, in essence, what this resolution is stating. We're asking for your approval with today, and if Kelly has any comments about other than what I've stated, then I would defer to him.
And this is just this contract for city roads, not state roads.
That's correct, ma'am.
All right, good.
Do we have an idea of a cost? I guess they go by tonnage, or how do they determine that?
What I can enter into the record, Mr. Mayor, so what I provided here was the base document. They have addendums to those contracts, which we can add to that as far as the record, which shows what their contract rates are. As far as the cubic yard removal and the hours spent and all those kinds of things. So I have that as an addendum.
That's what I'm saying. That's part of what the county, we did not
Yes.
renegotiate that. The
That's
county
correct.
has done that. They've gone through all their legal to make sure. Okay.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. So they're honoring the county rates.
Right.
The county rates is what's covering both City of Macon and City of North Augusta. So we don't have to then negotiate separately for those rates. We're all falling under the Aiken County rate structure for debris removal.
Good. Okay. That's all I want to know. Okay. Are there any citizen comments? Go. Any council discussion? Any questions for Ms. Clifford?
I'm going to say something.
Yeah, council discussion. Go ahead.
No, I'm going to vote for this, but here's your federal government in action. Got to have someone watch someone pick up debris. As much as I don't want to, I mean, we got to get it done for our citizens, but ridiculous.
Have they already started work?
Yes, ma'am, they have.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 4, administration resolution number 2024-51, authorizing the city of North Augusta to enter into a contract with R&R Tree Service to perform tree cutting, debris removal, and disposal for the city of North Augusta. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
All right, Mr. McCauley, thank you. All right, Ms. Carpenter, thank you, ma'am. I'd like to update us about this, please, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so this is a resolution that was built off a request for proposals that we put out with Roy Kibler's input, along with some other staff members, about tree removal on city property, specifically the greenway in our parks. What I would tell you right now is it is unclear to us, and we're waiting for a legal opinion from Aiken County about whether the existing SDR and Tetra Tech contracts will be allowed to be used for cleaning of the greenway. And so if the SDR contract can be used in that way, that may be, not definitely, but might be the more advantageous way to go, either from a cost perspective or from a time perspective. But that's still unclear. And so what this allows us to do is, after we get full consultation with Aiken County, allows us to move into a contract with R&R Tree Service to be able to do the greenway and a certain number of parks if required. And so what you're going to see here is a cap of $1 million. The low bid was $917,000 to take care of all of our parks and the greenway in its totality. And then also there was a separate pricing structure for leaning trees. And so what SDR and the SCDOT contractors are going to do and are doing is trees that are leaning from the city right-of-ways or the state right-of-ways into the road networks, those are going to be handled by those contractors. However, if you have a tree that says, say sits along the greenway and then is leaning into somebody's property and there's a concern that that's going to collapse, those trees are not covered under currently the SDR or the Tetra Tech contract. So we need at least a contract vehicle that would allow for us to be able to send a tree company to go and cut down trees that Roy Kibler has determined to be eminent or urgent requirements to be able to cut down those trees. If it's not an eminent or urgent requirement, we're not in a mad rush to take care of those right now. But if we have 5 or 6 trees, which I believe we do, that need to be cut down, then this would give us a vehicle to which to move forward. So what I'm not saying today is we're going to execute a $917,000 contract with this company. What we're saying is that would be the $1 million would be the cap if they do everything. If we ask them to do the greenway and all the parks and then cut down some trees, that's the high-end cap for that cost. We'll negotiate the contract with R&R based on this resolution if passed, and it may be up to that point, but it also may be less than that point depending on what the opine is about the use of SDR specifically for the greenway. My understanding is when they did the ice storm response, that company, they did a contract amendment to allow them to do some of the trail networks inside Aiken County, and based on the current rules of FEMA, that may or may not be allowable, at least for reimbursement purposes. This went through our standard procurement process and was advertised for 7 days. It was on the city website. We had multiple bidders. We actually had 3. And so this will survive a legal challenge or a FEMA questionnaire about, hey, why did you pick this vendor to do this thing? Because it went through a normal procurement process and still operates within the 90 days. So I want to have the most amount of options on the table for the city to move forward because, again, as a reminder, the first 90 days allows for up to 100% reimbursement from FEMA. After that, that ratio dwindles. So we want to get the most amount of work done in the shortest amount of time to be the most eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So this gives us a vehicle for flexibility to be able to do that if needed. And so that's why we went out to bid for this particular ask. And again, this could be a couple different shades of this as far as the contract goes. It could be just parks, it could be just the greenway, it could be just the trees. It could be a number of different things, but that's all going to be dependent upon what we get back from Aiken County. But we wanted to have this in pocket and ready to go so that we can move forward on this as we go.
This is an option in case we need it. Do we have any idea when we think we will know from Aiken County about SDR? I mean,
I've asked for a formal response by Friday.
And this, at the beginning, you said like the tree sitting on city property, but it falls onto the private citizen. What did you say on that?
I shouldn't say that it falls, that it leans.
Oh, leans.
So if it's already fallen, we have a case study for that, and I'll remind everybody when we go through the debris thing tonight. But this is for trees that have not fallen.
But this would be covered under this company.
This company would do that kind of work.
Right.
And again, not for trees that are over the roadways.
Right.
Trees that are from city property over a house.
Okay. Sounds like a winner.
any citizen comments? Okay, any council discussion? All right, here and now, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are going to adjourn from this meeting, and then we'll move right into our study session. So this meeting stands adjourned. Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the study session of North Augusta City Council from Monday, October the 28th, 2024 to order. At this time, I will turn this over to our city administrator, Mr. Jim Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so for this evening, we're going to do an agenda review for next week. In the interest of time, since I know we have a lot of things to cover tonight, including the budget and a debris update. Department details have been provided for you. That is a hard copy. We're not going to have the directors come up and pitch their department details tonight. So we'll go through the agenda, and then we'll do a budget review. You have a copy of that presentation, I believe, before you. And then we're going to go into a Hurricane Helene update, as I promised. We'll do that on a weekly basis, or at least every time the council meets. I'll give you an update and give you an opportunity to ask questions as we go through there. So with that, if that's okay with you all, we'll go ahead and move into the agenda items. And I'll skip directly to item number 7. Under new business, we only have new business, no old business on the agenda. And so the first one is ordinance number 2024-24, complying with sections 10-1 and 10-2 the Code of Laws of North Augusta, South Carolina, by setting dates for municipal party primaries, conventions, and partisan general election, times for filing of nominating petitions, certification of candidates by parties, and certification of candidates by municipal election commission, first reading. And I will turn this to either Jamie or Kelly if they want to talk through that.
Mayor and Council. Actually, number 7 and number 8 kind of coincide together. So the first half is for the general election. The standard ordinance will be with you or given to you by packet time by Friday. Attorney Zier and I are still going over some other items within that. And then number 8 is the where we request for Aiken County Election Commission to run partial of the election as well. And we're in process of working with Aiken County on that as well. So we're waiting for a couple, and along with the Municipal Election Commission needs to meet as well and get everybody up to par due to the hurricane. Little things got delayed.
Say that again about number 8. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. You want to speak it? Say
Sure.
that. Yeah. This is for a primary?
The primaries run because we are a partisan municipality. The partisan election or the primary election would be ran by the parties that
Right.
would need to have a primary.
Right, okay.
Either whatever party that may be. For the general election, we have always partnered with Aiken County to run partial of the election.
Partnered, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
That's the word I
My-
missed, partnered, okay,
Okay.
I understand. Thank
So,
you. I'm
and-
with you now.
So we'll have them run the elections, but however, we'll still have the MEC, the Municipal Election Commission, still tally votes and like we have done in the past.
Is there a requirement, so once we set this date and vote on it, is there a requirement for the Republican Democrat parties to back that into what their date is? So they'll know that once we approve it, I guess. Okay. Okay, I was curious. Okay.
It is built in with the ordinance so
Okay,
that
good.
they get it. And then if you guys approve it, I do notify each party member or the chairperson of each party. So they have it
Perfect.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, is a primary, and I missed that, I guess, required, let's say there'd be no Democrats running, all the Republicans or all Democrat, you have to have a Republican primary.
Only if they have filed more than what the seats are open.
Okay, and we'll have 4 seats open this time with
3.5.
Eric
Three and a
going,
half.
because there'll be.
Separate one.
Huh?
He has his own special.
3.5.
Yeah, so they'd vote for 3 of us for the 4-year term, and then this would be for
2 years.
Huh.
Finish out his term.
term out, okay.
Yes, there'll be 3 seats for council members, 1 for the mayor, along with the filling in the.
Now, if
remainder.
y'all like to do a phone a friend,
All right, good enough. Thank you.
All right, that covers the election ordinances. That's ordinance number 2024-24 and 25. And then what I'd like to do is push over to Tommy Paradise under P&D, ordinance number 2024-26, amending our articles 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 14 of the North Augusta Development Code, chapter 18 of the City of North Augusta, South Carolina Code of Ordinances. Tommy, to you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and Council. We've been working in the development code that was adopted last December for almost a year now. We're trying to clean up some typos and some things that we think are mistakes in it, or to clarify things or deconflict things. And so that is what's before you tonight. I can go into what the specifics are if you want me to. There's a lot in there. You have the striked and underlined copies for you to review. That is the verbiage that would go into the zoning or in the development code. And then if you look on attachment 9, page 7 of 31, there's a memorandum there that, as I call it, is the Cliff Notes of what all of this is, that was sent to the Planning Commission. But basically, it amended the parking in a lot of the districts was cited section 6.4, which had nothing to do with parking. We changed that to Article 8. In the R5 zoning district, had a minimum side yard of 15 feet. In the old code, that was 5 feet. So we thought that that was a typo, putting the 1 in there. The Planning Commission has recommended these changes as well. The height limitation in public use was limited to 35 feet, whereas before there was not a height limitation. And I go back to what the former mayor said one time. Public use district's a little bit different when you're putting water towers in there. That'd be hard to do with 35 feet. Manufactured home residential we just added dwelling units per acre there. We added notes to tables 10.2 and 10.4. Those notes were in the previous code, but they got omitted in this code. Table 9.3 conflicted with 1 and 2. Is at one point it said they could have 100 square feet. Another place it said 200 square feet. What the planning commission's recommending is it be 200 square feet. We also added repair and replacement language and non-conforming signs. Same verbiage out of the old code, but it was verbiage that wasn't included in this code. Minimum width for the planning area. We fixed the table. It was referencing the wrong table. And then amended Article 14 to include fixture mounting and allowable height for outdoor sports facilities and lighting curfew. Basically, you have to dim the lights, and the lights can only be a certain height depending on the zoning district. And that was something that we had omitted from the other code as well. So that's the intent of what we're trying to do. And just be forewarned, you've got more coming as we dig through this. But do you have any questions?
Okay, to make sure I heard you right. So on notes to tables 10.2 and 10.4, those are the same notes that were in the previous code. All we're doing is moving them into this new code.
Yes, sir.
We haven't made any changes to those. All that's the same. Okay.
Cut and paste.
Okay. Okay. Cut and paste. Good. Okay. Was there much soul searching discussion about the mixed use 1 and 2, the maximum area on the signs? Was that something pretty
That went
kind of picked up pretty
back
much and made
and
sense?
forth. What happened is in the Georgia overlay district, you're limited to 100 square feet.
Yep.
There was a chart. And then the downtown, in the downtown business, you was allowed 200 square feet. So when it got converted over, it had one chart saying 100 square feet and one saying 200 square feet. And of course, you don't have the Georgia Avenue overlay district anymore. So they went with the 200 square feet.
Very good. That's a good call.
Thank you, sir.
A lot of effort. Thank you, Tommy.
Next item is under engineering, resolution number 2024-52, authorizing a permit for construction work, and Tom Zeser is going to talk that one.
So again, we have a contractor planning to start next week on the West Avenue Crosswalk Improvement Project, and he is proposing to conduct the majority of that work at nighttime just to ease traffic control on West Avenue. And so this resolution is just a permit for him to conduct after-hours construction work. We don't have a specific schedule yet, but it's intended that this resolution cover the length of his contract to completion, however long that takes.
Good. Thank you.
You know, if I can just throw something out there, we continually have these, and I would just question if council would maybe consider a revision to the ordinance that would allow the city administrator to waive some of these requirements without it having to come to council. We certainly would have the ability to do that, and it seems like it's happening more and more.
That's a valid point. That's a good point. Okay. So, do we proceed here and then just move that forward? What do you suggest?
I can propose an ordinance.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, he'll do that. That sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Good idea.
Last but not least, I'll turn it over to JD McCauley for cross-acting rules 2024-53.
Yes, this is an ordinance for some more mural work in the city. However, this is going to be moved to a future meeting, so it won't be on your agenda next week. We had some creative adjustments from the artist. Also, they're going to be submitting an updated request to the mural review board before it'll come before council. Delays also. This was to come behind the West Avenue Crosswalk project, which Tom was just talking about. So slight delay there. So just in delays from the storm and also a little bit of creative changes, this is going to be showing up before the end of the year, but not next week.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes the agenda review. And again, we're going to skip past department details, which you have a hard copy of there at the dais for each of the council members. And then if, with your permission, we'll go ahead and move into our budget briefing. As we're getting the slides up here, there's a lot of data to cover. And so what I would seek as approval here from the council is to allow myself and the staff to go through the slides up until pretty much the last slide, to just go through that as one full presentation, and then we'll reset it. And then if you have specific questions about specific line items or departments, all the department leads are here in the room, and they've all been told they have full authority to say whatever they want to say here to the council. If you have direct questions for me or for any of the department heads through the budget process, we're prepared to answer your questions. But if you're okay with that, I'll go ahead and start off into the budget briefing. And so next slide, please. So no update to the purpose from last year, which is really just update you and the public on our balanced budget proposal. And again, as required by ordinance, I'm required to give you a balanced budget, not one that is out of balance for you to balance there on the dais. Next slide. This is the remaining budget counter. And again, this looks different than previous budget years and likely future budget years because of Hurricane Helene. So normally we would go through this process and have an approved budget usually by the end of November and have things lined up into early December. But because of the Helene impacts, what you have now is the study session that's this evening and potentially tomorrow night if needed. And then we'll publish the hearing notice in November. The budget hearing will be the very start of the budget ordinance reading on the 2nd of December. And because we have two separate already scheduled council meetings in December, we'll be able to pass, or at least have the potential to pass this budget through two different readings there in the month of December. And if a special call is required, then we'll schedule that if required. But right now, that's the current status of the budget calendar as we have it. So just wanted you to have a visibility of that as we went forward. Next slide, please. So talk a little bit about the budget drivers. One is you're going to continue to see this. We as the city and all municipalities across the state of South Carolina are going to see increases in PIVA, increases in healthcare, just the way that seems to be going right now, and we're having to react to that just like every other city here in the state. But we have that as an increase, and then also we're going to recommend a 3% cost of living allowance, which I think is in grade with what we're seeing here with the economy. And so Archer had recommended a 4 to 4.25 or 4.4, but we went with 3% as something that we could do for our workforce and also add some things to the rules to include additional personnel. And what you also see on there is we're adding 3 full-time personnel, and that does not include grant-funded personnel. So we have grant-funded personnel that are being paid for through grant mechanisms. So, for example, school resource officers, that's something that their salaries are covered through state of South Carolina. It is not on the general fund. So you'll see more people than 3 as far as added to the roles, but 3 is what we're paying for out of the general fund. And then the other budget driver is this is still part of our plan to move forward to get out of the lease purchase environment. And again, as a reminder from last year, when interest rates are below 2%, there's a strong argument to be made for lease purchase vehicles. But when those rates are 4, 5, 6%, that makes a much harder argument to go for. And if you have to do lease purchase, that's one thing. But we're trying to make a concerted effort to do outright purchase of our vehicles on the front end as opposed to doing lease purchase because we just lose money through interest payments in doing that.
Can we ask a question now? I got one on this page.
You can just go ahead and start on your page, Councilwoman, and you can start on your page, and I'll come back to it.
On the cost of living, 3%, because one of my main concerns that our people are paid a little more. So, I thought last year it was a 4% cost of living, and 3 looks like they're being deducted. Am I missing the point?
It's based off of Consumer Price Index, Councilwoman. So the CPI changes year to year, and this 3% is in line with what CPI is.
But does that mean they'll be lower? Your paychecks? No, they get 3% on top of the 4%?
Yes.
Whoa, yippee.
4% that they got last year.
Okay.
So it's cumulative. It's additive.
Okay, all right, okay. And yeah, right. That's what we didn't want. Okay. And I don't know how I need to ask this, but if there's some employees are really chicken fanny.
Councilwoman, can I get you to hold that question for the end so we can go through the rest? Thank you. All right, next slide. So budget drivers, I'm going to have Linda talk this a little bit about what that means there in yellow, and you can get an update from her directly because I'll probably butcher the math.
Okay, so we kind of presented this graph last year, so I haven't really changed anything except I added the 2025 estimate. So they estimated that if we did a lease purchase for the 5 years that we normally do, that we would have about a 3.52% interest rate. While it's down from last year, it's still quite a bit higher than from the 2022. So if we did a lease purchase, you would see that we would be spending about $140,000 over the 5 years in interest as compared to about $62,000 that we would have spent in 2022's interest rate pricing. That budget savings by year. So this is what, by not lease purchasing, and our lease purchases will kind of come off of the budget up until 2028. So that 2028 will be the last year we're paying for a lease purchase. So we'll add those funds, that amount we'll be able to add to the budget year by year. So you're looking at about, just in public safety alone, we'll add about another $500,000 available funds for budgeting vehicles and equipment for them. And for the rest of the general fund, you're looking at about $180,000. And then the enterprise funds will be about $656,000. And as you can see in 2024, I've highlighted what we budgeted in public safety in the general fund and the enterprise funds. So in 2025, I've highlighted the request totals. And right below that is the difference. So that's the increase from 2024 budget. That's what we increased our vehicle and equipment budget by for the 2025 budget without having to do lease purchase.
So again, we're trying to make this a longer term. This is going to take several years for us to get there, but this is important because it does cost us more money up front as opposed to lease purchase. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Right now, we have a set number each year.
Correct.
So I'm sorry, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So the 1.9 million is what we currently have budgeted to pay outright. What will happen is, so in 2025, we do not have to pay $350,000 in lease purchase payments. So we were able to add $350,000 from our current payments that we were making. So that expires. We made the final lease payment purchase on that lease last year. So now that's available this year. Correct. And then we'll have, another $1 million that we're able to add in equipment and finance, equipment and vehicles.
So,
Mayor.
do we have the cash up front to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
We
Perfect.
don't have the cash to do it all at one time. That's why you're going to see
Right.
this phased over 4 or 5 years.
No, and that's fine. Yeah. Good.
Next slide, please. So I'll talk about personnel additions. So the first is, and you'll see this on a later slide, but this is the year that we're going to separate courts and records from public safety. So public safety is going to maintain the records department, and then you're going to have separate court personnel that are managed administratively in a different department. And so ultimately, in order to make that separation, we need to have supervisors over both sections. So we need a court records, court supervisor, and we need a records supervisor. So we're adding a records supervisor. This person will be in public safety, and so that's a new add. And the rest of the personnel that are currently in courts and records, which is one cohesive group, will get split out amongst the two groups between courts and records, not all one thing. We're also adding a PSO, a public safety officer. And so those of you know Doug Rubin, who's our DUI grant officer. When we do a grant program, either for traffic or DUI or anything else along those lines, they're paying for that for X number of years, usually 3. And then the agreement is when that officer comes off the grant funding, you absorb that officer into the roles, and then you're not firing a different officer to make space for it. So you're basically, when you're doing a grant like this, you know that X number of years down the road, you're going to fully absorb that officer's pay, benefits, vehicle, all those kinds of things. And so that's what's happening this year with Doug Rubin's position. And so we have to absorb him onto the budget this year. And lastly, we're adding one more person for the Greenway. Since I've been here, when I first started, we had one person working the Greenway or dedicated to the Greenway. We added a second, and this will be a third to be able to work on the Greenway and coordinate some of those actions. You're going to have some additional personnel that are not bolded. Those personnel are not going to be impacting the general fund, but they are new to the role. So we have 2 grant public safety officers. One is a DUI, one's a traffic safety grant officer. Again, those are largely paid for out of grant funds. And then also one new SRO, additional SRO from North Augusta High School. I get that right, Chief? Okay, funded by state level grant. So those are new ads, but they're not in the general fund. That's why they're not bolded. And then on the next 2 lines there, you can see we're restructuring, which will be part of this budget, which is not a major impact to the general fund. And one is restructuring the customer service clerk within Linda's department in finance to a procurement specialist. So we're basically taking 2 different duties or part-timers and put them into one duty, if I'm saying that correctly. No? Linda's making the face. But the end of the day is we're gonna try to centralize our contracting and procurement within one office in the city. So what's happening right now is most of the directors are given some guidance, and they go out to bid and they do a number of things. And there's some benefit to that, but there's also some downsides. And so ultimately what we want to do is centralize some of our procurement here within the city so that we're making sure we're following all the rules, and also more importantly, making sure we're getting the best pricing for anything that we're doing. And so we're going to basically take a position there within finance, meld some other positions and change them around and make that a procurement specialist. And then also we're going to restructure taking 2 part-time positions. That's probably where I was tripping over it. The public works secretary, because for a period of time within building standards, you had 2 full-timers and a part-timer, and then you also had a part-time position in finance, and we're taking those 2 together, making them 1 full-time position, which is to the administrative sector, if you will, and then those costs will be split amongst the general sanitation utilities funds because they'll be supporting each of those funds. And so you can lay out an argument for how they have the proportional change for their salary. But if you have any specific questions on this one, when we come back, Linda will be able to talk that, or Tom can do that as well. All right, next slide. So this is where we're adding, again, what you're not going to see on here are major projects. We've been doing a lot of projects here in the city, and we're funding most of those either with capital project sales tax or with ARPA or DOE settlement money, but not out of the general fund. And so most of the items you see listed here, again, are not large items other than the just the capital improvements we're making. So we've got some light-duty pickup trucks that we're buying outright, not through lease purchase, for public works and code enforcement. Full-size truck for Roy's crew on property maintenance. This is going to be our first year trying this out, and we figured that what you see there is landscape maintenance contract funding. So property maintenance is having a hard time keeping up with the amount of work that is before them as far as the rights of way and making sure everything looks good. And so what we're going to do is augment their staff with a contract, and we're going to work through what the contract mechanism is, but to pick some certain areas at Roy's discretion that we can contract out to have an outside crew clean those or upkeep those areas, and allow Roy's team to be able to focus on the things they need to focus on. So this will be our first time doing it. It's a modest amount. They asked for more money than this to do it, but this will be our first try into this. If it works well, we'll seek to expand it. And if it doesn't work well, then we'll kill it and do something else. We also have a number of mowers, both the 60-inch and 52-inch mower. And then also we're going to buy a towable aerial lift. And so this is to allow us to do work on Georgia Avenue, allows us to, instead of using a bucket truck, which we use right now for hanging up the big banners for, things on Georgia Avenue, or do some work on some of the decorative lighting, we're buying a towable aerial lift, and that's going to be split between both streets and drains and property maintenance. So it's split in the budget between those 2 areas because both those departments will be using that piece of apparatus. We're also going to do some minor upgrades to the operations facility out in James Sutton area. They definitely need some new flooring. This stuff's looking a little haggard and worn. It's been out there a long time. And then under Parks and Rec, we're replacing 2 golf carts, a wheel mower, a debris blower, and a sweeper. Those are all things that will be used by Parks and Rec. For public safety, we're going to do a minor project, but a project to update the animal shelter's flooring. That's something that's been asked for, and we'll do it this year. And then they've got some routine replacements such as fire hoses, and then Chief's getting a cat team vehicle, which I think is like a souped-up gator or something like that.
It's actually a Polaris model, but we'll be able to use it to put a skid unit in, like if somebody's on the Greenway with a medical emergency, so that we can get in there and get them out of there.
And may I speak on that? Junior was so sweet Saturday to ride me on the gator, to take me to my car, and I'm telling you, didn't it, Junior? It's an awful sound. We didn't know we were going to break down any minute. So that definitely needs replacing.
I'll second that because I also got a ride back and I thought it was about to cut off.
I'd like to state for the record that the Public Safety Department did not offer me a ride anywhere after the JOJ. And then last but not least, public safety vehicles. I'll tell you, the Tahoes, they're expensive. I mean, they're close to $100,000 all in when you talk about the light package, the cage in the back, the dash cam, all the things that go along with it to make it a viable vehicle. Those are expensive. And these 8 public safety vehicles isn't even fully touching all of the requests, and I'll cover that on a later slide. But that's not an insignificant purchase, especially not doing lease purchase where we're buying them outright. And Chief and I talked about looking at some other options. So even though the Tahoe's the preferred vehicle, those are getting harder and harder to get. So we may or may not buy some additional vehicles. It'll still be within this 8, but some of those may be a mixture of Tahoes and Chevy Silverados that are done up in a police pursuit kind of way. When I met with the Chevy representative at International City and County Managers Association conference, they're really trying to push a lot of electric models, and ultimately, based on our model of 12-hour patrol shifts, that's just not going to work. And he did the representative I talked about the fact that there really are trying to push a lot of public safety departments and police departments into different models away from the Tahoe, and so they're making less of them, and they're harder to get. So we're going to potentially try out some other options here this year with the Silverados to see if that's going to scratch the itch for us or not. Next slide, please. So as I talked about earlier, this is the organizational change. The position in bold, which is supervisor of records, is the new add. Every other position here is on the general fund already. And so we'd add 1 supervisor of records, and those personnel would work within the Public Safety Department, ultimately for Chief Junior Johnson within his area. And then under municipal court, if this budget's approved, again, those personnel who are already on hand, those are going to fall into the portfolio of the Assistant City Administrator, J.D. McCauley. And our city attorney has been advising us for some time now that there is some legal risk about having the courts personnel working under public safety, and especially an adversarial system of law, that's not appropriate. And so this will allow us to separate those functions, even though they'll be in the same building. When we get to the new public safety headquarters, there's a clear delineation between courts personnel and records personnel as far as where they work, and then also who they work for if this budget is approved. And this was my number one personal number one going into this budget year, was to make sure we had this accomplished. And I felt with our timing with the new public safety headquarters likely being online early next year, this is a good time to make that change. Next slide, please. And budgets are all about priorities and decisions. So I thought it was just as important to show you what we're not funding, not just what we are. So there's a laundry list of things that public safety does, and much like when I was a kid getting the Sears catalog from my parents, Chief gets together with his folks and they figure out all the things that they want. And so you're seeing right up there all their folks that they're not getting this year in the budget. And then under equipment, you can see the equipment they've asked for. And I would tell you there's some that I don't have a good plan for, but there are others that I do. And so you can see under equipment, a number of those items, especially when it comes to fire apparatus, are going to be met if CPSD 5 is passed in the voter referendum here next week. That's our mechanism to get after a lot of these larger capital requirements, especially on the fire side. And then also the indoor firing range upgrades, that's going to be something we're going to make an attempt to fund through the Military Enhancement Fund, which we're now eligible for with the state of South Carolina, as long as Fort Eisenhower gives us a letter of support, which I'll be working on. And then you can see also that, again, they asked for 15 Tahoes. They're getting 7 or 8. And then they also had previously requested an upgrade or a correction, a change from their 45 caliber pistols to 9mm, and I'm not able to do it in this budget.
How many dispatchers do we have?
We have a total of 8, Councilwoman.
Oh, 8, okay, all right.
So we have 2 per shift, and what we would like to be able to do is add a supervisor at some point in time. And if I was, not that Chief asked me, but if I was going to pick his number 1 personnel not funded, the dispatch supervisor would probably be number 1 or number 2.
But is there a supervisor for the dispatchers or not?
There is not. There's not a.
Are they under junior?
They're under Captain Williams,
Okay.
and they're actually ostensibly under the command of the shift lieutenant. So it's not they don't have leadership, but what we don't have is any slack in the line, so that if a dispatcher has to call out sick, or there's a problem, or we have somebody who's focused on training, like we would like to have somebody who's in charge of all the dispatchers, an actual dispatcher, as opposed to a public safety officer. Next slide, please. All right, requested but not funded Parks and Rec. So they also asked for a maintenance worker 3, which is more of like a janitor type position for the Riverview Park Activity Center. So they'd asked for that, and I said no. I couldn't fit that in the budget this year. And then under equipment, again, lots of playground items that were requested, but I believe those will be met under CPSD 5 if those pass as a voter referendum. What I don't have a good plan for right now, part of it is pickleball courts. We haven't had a study session even about, if we're going to have pickleball courts, where would they be? That may be funded with CPSD 5, but I think it depends on the location those would go. And then there was an ask to resurface the tennis courts this year, but based on the initial pricing that I saw, which was I think in the neighborhood of $70,000, did not put that on the list for this year for a budget ask. Next slide.
Well, hold on. What about Summerfield Park?
Okay. Councilwoman, can you put a pin in that or at least write that for me? Next slide. All right, and then also requested but not funded under tourism. And when I say not funded in the general fund. There are risk mitigations that we have for funds. And so you have a number of items there under equipment. The first 3 items specifically have to do with the community center. And based on my understanding of what the capital project fund is supposed to be used for, my recommendation is that those would be funded under the capital projects fund. And then the last 3 items, which is a 15-passenger van. You're familiar that they've got the little short bus now. That really doesn't meet the requirements that they have in order for us to do the tourism things that we're supposed to be doing. And so we really envision more of a like a Sprinter van style van to be able to meet that. And so we think we can fund that out of the Riverfront Central Corps. Likewise, we want to get a light duty pickup truck, which, like a small Ford Ranger or Maverick style pickup truck with an enclosed trailer, so they can take the things they need to take to the different events for a tourism perspective. And again, we believe we can fund those out of the Riverfront Central Corps, and especially now that they've broken ground at all the sites there at the Riverside Village, that gives us a better fidelity that fund is in better shape based on the development that's happening in that neck of the woods. Next slide. And then lastly, Tom had requested some exterior maintenance here on the municipal center. Again, I believe that's a capital project fund expenditure. And then we're going to offload one item, which is the right-of-way tractor for property maintenance, and put that in a capital projects fund. And then Roy had requested money for the downtown plant care, which is really for the hanging flower baskets, but I view that as a downtown development line item. So that's how I'm planning on funding that for now. Next slide. All right, and these are the community funds. And so, again, everybody comes in and asks for a decent amount of money, and so we use some historical patterns associated with those and the asks that they have, and also what they would do with it. And so we can see the requested and the allocated there. And again, I felt that with FONA in particular, we've not had a financial arrangement with that organization to date. There have been 2 things that are things that they've specifically asked for. One was the animal shelter floor resurfacing, and the other was the trap neuter release program budget. And so that was up from $5,000 to $7,500 in this year. Next slide. And then I'm going to have Linda talk through the fee schedules.
Okay, so we have the updated PRT fee schedule, and really the only change is that you will see a $5 increase among all of the memberships and the recreation programs. Next slide. This is the updated facility rental fee schedule. The only change on this was the medium room at $300. We reduced that $100, but all the others are the same as previous year. Next slide. Okay, so this is the updated wastewater fee schedule. We passed this back in September, I think. Yeah. So we will not be increasing it from the increase on October 1st. And you've got your base rate of $11.22 with the additional $1 per 1,000 gallons. So it's now $4.50. And then that's doubled on the out of city. So it went up $2 up to $5.60. Next slide. And this is the updated water fee schedule. Again, same scenario. We increased this back, or we voted to increase this back in September. They went into effect October 1st, and we will not be increasing it from the October 1st increase. Again, that was just $1 on the base rate for that. Next slide. There were no changes to the stormwater fee schedule. Next slide. And there are no changes to the fire protection fee schedule. And I think, next slide. So this is just kind of a summary of what happened. So we had a water rate increase October 1st, the wastewater increase on October 1st, and a few PRT fee increases by, so just $5 per membership or recreation fee. And then again, what we are not increasing are sanitation fees, stormwater fees, fire protection fees, and property taxes.
What I'd like to say also on this before we go back, thank you. Go back. There you go. So on this one, what you've seen historically over at least the last 2 years are large carryovers, like in the excess of $1 million to the capital projects fund. And so what you're going to see this year is less of a carryover. So I wanted to see that we could run a conservative budget, but we wanted to make sure we had the data that would support the lines that we have. And so ultimately, the fact that you can see some personnel increases, a COLA, some equipment, all those things without a millage increase is based on the fact that we've adjusted our parameters to allow for what we think we're going to be able to generate through revenue and through property taxes, as opposed to having an enormous carryover into the capital projects fund. So you should not expect to see the same kind of lump sum movement into the capital projects fund. You are going to see dedicated millage that the city council previously voted on that will still feed the capital projects fund. But what you're not going to see are these $1 to $2 million chunks, rolling over into the CPF. And so that's how we're going to accomplish a lot of things we're doing this year with this budget. Is we're stretching a little bit to make sure we're going to fit within what we think are the appropriate budget lines. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to have Linda talk a little bit about hurricane relief and what's happened in previous years with COVID, and then also how we're going to move forward with a potential amended budget next year. But Linda, I'll let you call that.
So I did contact our auditor and the city of Aiken just to see how they were how they thought, well, what the auditor's thoughts were and what the city of Aiken was doing. And the auditor agreed with my thought that this all needed to be funded out of the general fund. It is not something that any of the other funds that we have should be supporting. With that, he suggested that we do an amended budget, which we could do after the closeout of the year. But what an amended budget will do is it provides the council and the citizens an update on the new expenses and the new revenue that will be coming in due to the hurricane relief. We will have a new expense line under administration titled Storm Relief Efforts, and that will just kind of stay with us, and it won't be a budgeted line item most years. We will be expecting some payment from insurance, so that line item will need to kind of increase, and also we'll need a new revenue line for the FEMA reimbursements. And as the GFOA suggests, that a budget is supposed to change when conditions, needs, and priorities change throughout the year. So it's not something that's static, and it should adjust to the changes in the city. And this just allows the citizens to see that we are still going to be following through with budgets. So we will need to change and amend the 2024 budget so that we can make sure that we are following in line with with budgets.
And so as an example for the council, you might ask, okay, what are some of these hurricane relief expenses? So some of that may be things like overtime costs for city personnel that are working Saturdays and extra hours as part of a debris cleanup crew, certainly through sanitation, streets and drains, property maintenance. Those are not currently budgeted for expenses. Expenses associated with SDR and Tetra Tech, with the things that they're going to be doing, and then potentially with R&R as they do that moving forward. So those are the kinds of expenses. And then when we see revenue, really what we're talking about is FEMA reimbursements and insurance reimbursements against expenses that we have moving forward. So this allows for us to have a budget line that does this. This falls within the accepted best business practices. And so I would expect that you're going to be getting an update from us for an amended budget sometime in the spring, if not earlier, to account for all of these requirements for hurricane relief. Ideally, we're trying to get that as a one-to-one match. Next slide, please. And then changes to financial transparency. This is a decision that I'm making with Linda, but I wanted to do this in an open forum, in an open session with council so you were aware of it. Under previous mayor, we had received, or the city staff had received, guidance about putting check registers on the financial transparency page. I didn't believe that was a great decision at the time, but ultimately that's one that was enacted. And the problem we've had is now that we have bad actors that are harvesting that information and then trying to cut new checks or financial data based on the information that's posted on this page, and almost got something through our system to get an invoice paid through fraudulent means. And they used the information that was on our financial transparency page for these check registers to do it. And so ultimately, this information will still be available to the public, but if we go through the FOIA process, we can at least see who is requesting that information, and we have an audit log of where that information goes. But just by putting it on the city webpage and letting anybody look at it at any time, understand that we want to have transparency for our citizens, but now we're running into a problem where you're getting cyber piracy, if you will, on the financial transparency information we have. So I've directed Linda after the study session, subject to any guidance we may receive from City Council, to remove the check registers from the financial transparency page. And again, these are still going to be available for you or for citizens to look at, certainly through the FOIA process. They're not hidden. It's just a matter of making sure that they're not out there open in the wind. And we have an accountability perspective of who's got that information. Next slide, please. All right, this is not a change from last year, but this is just a reminder, and I'll just put this up here for the council. This is how we do debt service for Riverside Village. And I know this was a concern last year. It's probably less so, I hope, this year, based on the fact that we have development that's ongoing there across multiple parcels within South City Partners. But this is just a reminder, if you will, and we'll keep this in our packet that'll be published in the minutes for how these funds come together and how things are paid. So it shows you what the revenue streams are through the TIF funding, through stadium revenues, parking revenue, A-tax and H-tax, into the TIF and the Riverfront Central Core, into the North Augusta Facilities Corporation Fund, and then ultimately paying debt service out of that fund. So with that, I have one more final slide, but I'd like to hold that in abeyance until we have the full council discussion for the budget, and the directors and I are prepared to talk through any of the topics you'd like to talk about, specific to their departments or specific to how we have this general fund budget for your consideration today.
Now this is time to ask questions. Go ahead, Pat. It's your time. Whoever wants to go. Go ahead, Pat.
All right, the downtown planners, because the Beautification Foundation, at one time, North Augusta Forward was going to, I presume, water those and take care of them for 6 months. Then it was going to come up.
The city is taking on the watering.
So we are taking that up.
We're doing the watering, yes.
And I presume all of them What's his
They're
name,
aware.
Brian? No, that, okay. All right. And then Summerfield Park, is it,
Summerfield Park is listed under Capital Project Sales Tax 5. And so when we're looking at it is just like with most of the parks, not all the parks, but Summerfield Park is a CPSD 5 voter referendum item. So if we're going to make improvements to that park with the playground equipment or any major changes to that park system, that's going to have to be through Capital Project Sales Tax.
and if my mind remembers, that was about the what, 7th or 8th project on the Capital 5?
Parks was number 2. Number
Summerfield Park?
2. Number 1 is downtown. Number 2 were parks. Parks and Rec.
Okay.
And of that,
So we,
has to do with Creighton, Somerville, Riverview Park.
all right, and then some of the employees, like the different levels, to me, should be higher. I mean, how are we doing that? Then I mean, I don't know if that's just a personal matter or.
Well, as a practice, councilman, government employees are not usually receiving performance bonuses like you would in the corporate sector. We try to take care of our employees through COLAs, and I commend council for the work they've done over the last several years to make sure that our pay has been commensurate with the work that's been done. And so, they've certainly had several percentages of increase, at least over 10% over the last 3 years of pay increases based on COLA. But as far as do I do spot bonuses based on I think this person's doing a better job than that person, I don't think you find a lot of that in government.
I'm really not saying that, but just let's say they're at a level 10. How do you determine they go up to a level 14?
Well, it's not based on performance. It's usually based on their duties and responsibilities. And so what you've seen in previous budgets, Councilwoman, is in order to be consistent with the market forces, like 1 year we took the public safety officers and dispatchers and we moved them all up on grade. We did that because we were having a hard time being competitive in the market with public safety officers. And if we, through a reorganization, determine that the duties and responsibilities of the position have been upgraded, we give them more to do than their position description states, then we go and ask for a line item increase for that position to go from a 10 to a 14 or a 12 to 14 or whatever else.
But that's reviewed.
We do that every year, Councilman.
I know, I believe that's about all.
Pat, I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about, but I guarantee you ask anybody here from Kevin on down that works for a company, we are contributing 18.56% a year on every employee for their retirement. 18.56%. And for police officers, 21.24, along with employee contribution rates capped at 9%. So, I mean, I'm just telling the average person in their 401k in the company probably getting 18% money.
Well, that's, I mean,
so there's a lot of benefits besides just that. That is,
well, yeah, I know
that costs us a lot of money.
And then one more question. Do we not do Best Friends anymore with the bus coming through?
Best Friends Express is a county function, and I don't think we had a request from them this year for funding.
They will continue to come through North Augusta, though.
Yes.
That's a big thing for our citizens.
Who else? Yeah.
I'll go. Okay. Under the property maintenance being funded through a contract, when you were talking about it, does that make more sense than adding more personnel to that? Or?
Well, I would tell you, Councilwoman, we're having a hard time filling the crews that we have. Okay. I think we've got 5 separate crews. We're really only fully staffing 4 of them at a given time, and the churn on those is pretty high. So what we're doing is instead of using a 5th crew, if you will, I mean, I can add more personnel to that, but ultimately, if I can't fill the ones that I have, I don't think we're going to get anything out of it. And so that's why we're looking at doing some contract work for something that Roy feels like that he can offload.
And when y'all get to that point, you'll let us know, because that'll be important for us to know exactly what areas they are handling that.
And not just that, we're going to have to come back to council anyway, because we're going to have a contract. So you're going to have another bite of the apple, so to speak, because we're going to have to give you a contract vehicle to approve.
And Jim, that's a $30,000 contract for the year?
It's $30,000 budgeted for the year. That could look like one contract. That could look like multiple smaller contracts.
Well, no, and I get that, but what people need to understand is you can't hire one employee for that price.
That's correct.
And then for the Tahoes, the 8 public safety vehicles, what's their status? Like, what's their current condition?
They're old.
Old.
There's-
That's all we need to hear.
well, we look at usually like a 7-year cycle for our vehicles, and we have several that are well beyond that. And in some cases, like the Chevy Equinox, you see me cruising around in from time to time. I mean, we're going to squeeze that thing until the tires fall off, and it's not a big deal, and we'll just get another vehicle. But with public safety, because they have a pursuit requirement potentially, they're out there putting a lot of miles on those cars. That's one of those areas we try not to take too much risk in. We'll stretch a lot of cars well beyond their expected lifespan, at least from a government perspective. But the Tahoes and the vehicles that public safety has, we try to minimize that where we can.
Jim or Junior, either one. Some of these, let's say 7, 8, 10-year-old Tahoes, how much are we spending in maintenance a year versus what it would cost for a new one? Because that, a lot of people don't think about that, but I mean, it costs a lot to keep an old. That's why I got rid of mine.
Yes, sir. We're constantly having to replace motors and transmissions in those older vehicles.
And then, not really a question, I guess, just a thought that I was having, since the tourism department is very new and they're going to be getting added lots of events and things throughout the year. I think it'll be something that we need to continue to monitor, because I know what do you guys got, 3 people for your events on staff? 4, including you. So I just figure as that continues to grow, we need to keep that on our forefront, because I know as those events grow, that's a lot of manpower and time and extra hours in those areas. And as a new department, things are going to change as we learn more about it. And I'll let somebody else talk as I go through my notes.
David Buck.
All right, just a few questions. So evidently, of course, the insurance does go up, health insurance each year. So I'm assuming that the COLA is just going to kind of wipe that out, just so they're not,
Well, it depends. So when I say the PIVA contributions, that's the city's contribution that we're paying. And then you can see in previous years, we had one year where if you were the most junior, like pay grade 4, it was kind of a wash.
Okay.
But what you saw with the more senior pay grades, and by like pretty much all of them minus 1, it was always the COLA more than covered the insurance and the expenses that went along with that.
Gotcha. All right. What's the Greenway coordinator?
And there's no increase right now for insurance this year.
There's not. So
not for the employees.
Perfect. Rick, just curious. What's the Greenway coordinator?
David, we're basically a Greenway coordinator is someone whose job every day, like the city of Greenville does with the Swamp Rabbit Trail, somebody who manages social media, manages all the events we're going to have on the Greenway, oversees the 2 other Greenway employees that are on it, trying to step up our game with the Greenway. And we keep pulling maintenance people different directions. A working supervisor.
Okay. And talking about the animal shelter flooring, is that going to fix that drainage issue as well? I've been in there and I know there's been some draining issues. I mean, is that going to be addressed?
Yeah, because it's the old floor, it's chipping up, so the water doesn't come through good. So it should assist in that.
And then talking about the 8 public safety vehicles, I know that don't we still have some sitting at the Station 3 in the back?
Yes, sir. Those were the ones ordered for 2024. We had to wait till after July in order to order the cameras so that we could get a grant funding, because if you order before then, we wouldn't get it. And the rest of the things that are needed to outfit it were also ordered in July. And as you see, we're almost in November. There's 3 things that are still on back order. So once that stuff comes in, they're slated to go to be upfitted.
So a question I have about that is, we use a certain company to outfit the vehicles, right?
Yes, sir.
But it's not local, correct?
It is local.
It is.
Yes, sir, because we're constantly having to, when they get upfitted with the information technology, like we can't just take a car over there. Our members from our IT staff go over there and meet with them in order to line everything up so that when it does go on the road, the back end systems are linked up and we can get the videos out the car and all those.
Councilman, just for the record, we go out to bid for the upfit of the vehicles. And the low bidder last year was out of Spartanburg, South Carolina. But I made a record decision. And anytime I waive any procurement items, that has to be in the record. I sign a memorandum. It goes with the purchase order, and it stays with the finance director. And so what we did is did a quick assessment and said, for the amount of time it would take us, because when we take a vehicle up to Spartanburg, you have to take 2 officers. You got to pay somebody, overtime. You're driving up there to drop off the vehicle and then come back. And oh, by the way, anytime you have a problem with that vehicle, you're doing the same thing and you're shuttling up to Spartanburg to get fixed. So even though the local vendor wasn't the cheapest vendor, when we accounted for manpower and time associated with that, it was a better value for us to have a local vendor do the upfit.
Is there only one local vendor that does that? Or so we're kind of at their mercy of when they can get?
Yes, sir. There's only one local vendor.
So all the other agencies are using them.
And in talking with multiple agencies across the state, it's a common issue with taking time to get cars outfitted.
Quick question, Jim. Talking about FEMA, is there like a max that they're going to pay?
They haven't advertised a max pay, Councilman, but again, what I want to make sure is that we have a defensible case about why we spent the money we did and how we spent it. So I've got to be able to draw a clean audit trail about decisions that were made, and so that was one of the reasons why we had the special called earlier this evening that involved the council validation, if you will, of the SDR and the Tetra Tech contract, and also for the R&R tree contract, because then I can show, hey, I have a council action, we have a state of emergency, we have a council action, we have a contract, and then we move forward and show, okay, this is how we went through all this, and request FEMA reimbursement.
Last question, I promise. So going back to the check register with financial transparency, it makes perfect sense why we're doing that. But any citizen could do a FOIA request to get that information.
That's correct.
Can we make that no charge for that, at least that one type of request?
Well, Councilman, the way that we have our FOIA right now is that if it's under 15 minutes of staff time, it is free.
Okay.
So that's a very easy thing for our folks to pull. Where it gets into details when people go, I want to see an email from this person to this person across 5 years. That takes, IT back-end time to get all those.
I'm saying I can just hear, maybe some gripes. Hey, we can't see this information, but now we have to go pay for it.
Yeah, good point. But check fraud is really high right now, so I think that this is a very important step.
I totally agree with 100%. And that's all I got.
Mr. Young? I thought of, I know that we have these capital projects and the creating part on the capital project sales tax funds, but I'm assuming that once we get insurance situations straightened out with some of the damage that was done, that may change how much we have to spend in those certain areas, right?
That's correct, Councilman.
So we might find some other CPT funds later on that we can put in other places.
That's certainly possible.
One question I had is, Linda, under capital projects fund in the book, the tab, when we show actual from the general fund, that 1.9 million, Jim, that's what you were talking about from last year's general budget. So when we total that number, it has 3.5 million. Is that 3.5, is that already, that's included in this on page 128 where it says projected status capital projects fund, it has the fund being 8.2 million. So that 3.5 is made that is into that, is part of that 8.2 is what I'm saying.
Yes, that is correct.
And that's why I think it's important is, I guess we started that a couple of years ago, we're putting 3.8 mils into the capital projects because for years we weren't investing in that. So I think that's really important, even though you're going to see what Jim said, we're going to be using some of that in 2025. We're still way ahead because we've done this for the last couple of years. So I think it's very smart. So yeah, that was my only question. Let me see. I think that was all. JD, I think I asked you this already, so I've lost my thought on this a couple months ago. We did put money from ARPA into the facade grant program, right? Downtown facade, we still have money in that program?
We do still have money in that program. However, if it's not spent, obviously obligated by the end of this year, we'll have to backfill that with general fund dollars to keep that program going, which we have, I believe, in this budget.
Okay, good. I wonder. All right. Any other questions for Ms. Clifford or Linda? Anybody?
All right, let's go to the bonus round. Next slide, please. Late breaking news. Here's a potential addendum to our base budget. So within the last several weeks, Chief Johnson had gotten formal notification that in addition to the DUI and the traffic grant officers, they also got the COPS grant. So what Chief did, and I don't want to steal any of his thunder, so he'll probably be able to talk it more eloquently than I can, but what Chief did upon assuming command of the department early is he established the COPS team, or the CAT team, that goes out and does kind of the community engagement functions. He took that out of Hyde. So he took 3 officers that are normally line officers off a shift to build this capability in short line lieutenants and their shifts to be able to do this function because he felt it was important to him. And we've seen some very good feedback off of the use of the CAT team. However, he also put in for this COPS grant, which is the whole point of this grant is to basically build a CAT team. And if we accepted this grant, we'd be able to backfill the 3 officers that he pulled off the line shift to have on the CAT team as it is. And so we looked at it and said, okay, how would we be able to take advantage of this? Because it doesn't, some grants are really good. Some grants they pay for everything. They pay for the salary, they pay for the benefits, they pay for the car. You get the whole thing. Like the school resource officer grants are good grants. This is not quite that good. And so what it does is it pays for a portion of the salary. It doesn't pay for the vehicles and the upfit and the guns and the badges and all those other kinds of things. So what I laid out for you there is we looked at a potential strategy of adding these 3 officers on or about the 1st of July of next year. And in practical terms, Chief's not ready to recruit those 3 officers in January anyway because he's got other holes he's trying to fill. And so 1 July would be the earliest we really want to do this anyway. And so if we do it on 1 July, the cost to the general fund would be just under $11,000. And then you can see from there between 26, 27, and 28, the kind of the graduated increases. That's salary. That's nothing else. That's just the salary and the benefits piece. And so there's no funding mechanism in the general fund for any of the other items that go along with it. Doesn't come with Chevy Tahoes, doesn't come with whatever else. And so what I would say is if you wanted to take advantage of an opportunity here to add 3 public safety officers at reduced cost than normal, we could do so, but my recommendation then would be to use ARPA to fund the equipment for those officers. So that would be the Chevy Tahoes, and then I would have to add 1 more vehicle to offset the rest of the cost there. So essentially I would come back and say, hey, I would bring a council action in November saying I want to fund, or you want to fund, the equipment and the vehicles for these officers out of ARPA. That gives us enough breathing room out of the general fund to add those officers. Understand that you're going to be taking more of a financial liability in future years based on having these officers on the road. And so ultimately, we could do this for very low impact in next year's budget, and then it'll ramp up over time from there. But I wanted to put that on the floor for your discussion and debate, in that if that's something that the council was interested in doing, I would need you to issue me guidance to say that, yep, we're interested in doing that. We would amend the budget document that you have before you that would add 3 PSOs to the line, and then I would bring you a subsequent ARPA funding request using pretty much a chunk of the remainder of the ARPA to go after those vehicles and equipment and upfit to buy those 3 officers. And I'll pause for questions.
But am I looking at this the right way? I mean, with our new moving from leasing to purchasing, what that is saving us, I mean, that basically is not dollar for dollar, but that's going to help cover this cost because that's going to be added to the budget, right? Is that impacting us at all? You see what I'm saying?
No, we're not
saving money from the.
We are saving money, but we've already balanced the budget based on what we currently have.
Going forward, talking about new money coming.
This is a potential offset, as you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, where in future years, where we're not paying those vehicle costs on
2028, what's going to be added back that
Correct.
We do not have that budgeted at this point.
That's correct. Although we're still going to have what's unknown at this point in time is the cost of the Tahoe in 2028.
Yeah.
Does it match ARPA's requirements?
ARPA's requirement is for us to be able to fund those items and have at least a contract or purchase order before the end of the calendar year. So as long as those items are on contract, the vehicles, the equipment are on contract before the end of December, as long as we're in receipt of those items before December of 2026, we're in good shape.
What would you not be using those ARPA funds for that you were planning to use them on this?
ARPA can be used in a lot of different ways here at the end of the year. We had set aside some ARPA money for a downtown parking project, which doesn't look like it's going to be ready for fruition before the timing that it was required, which we're going to backstop with CPSD 5. You could use that to buy another trolley. You could use that to buy playgrounds for Creighton Park. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility within the ARPA line. So the opportunity cost is really dependent upon, what the city council would want to do with ARPA here at the end of the year.
So I was going to say, I like this idea, but I think it'd be helpful if you come back to us and say, okay, here's what the ARPA dollars at. You just gave an example. We thought we may go, this project's not going to work, and come back to us with several examples, say this could go toward a new trolley, this could go toward this could go toward whatever it may be. Give us 3 or 4 options of dollars that right now you don't have earmarked.
Pretty much.
What do y'all think about that?
Pretty much you're saying that it has to be a shovel-ready project almost for you to be able to use those ARPA funds before the end of the year.
Yeah, I would tell you, Councilman, the way I view it right now is that anything we'd have to buy with ARPA would have to be equipment or items, like an actual, physical device, not a project, not something that we would go after and have, contractor do something on our behalf. It would have to be something physical. So vehicles, playground equipment, trolley, whatever else. That's what we would have to have in order for us to meet the ARPA timeline going forward.
And Jim, I think it's obvious by what you're saying, but we do not have any of those identified. So there's no real direct thing that you're saying, hey, we had planned on using this money specifically for this, but we would not do that to do this.
I have a number of options that I could present to council, and I know that, for example, JD's been running to ground the trolley project. So we've ordered a trolley. We know exactly what that costs. It's very easy for us to add another trolley to and right now we're planning on funding the second trolley out of CPST 5. But that's a very easy thing to get on a purchase order because we bought it through HGAC buy. You don't have to go for the 3-bid thing. So really it's just a matter of saying, take the exact order we just did and buy us another one at the cost of roughly $250,000.
I was talking about the COPS grant. Can you tell me what that amount is? Is it like per year, I'm assuming?
So the total amount is $375,000, and it's set up for whenever they approve it for moments just like this. On the front end, it's heavier, which is why the only cost is $10,995. And the next year, the amount that the federal pays is less and dwindles down through. It's 3 years, but if you started in July, that's why it would have an effect across 4 budget years here.
So $375 for 3 years, basically.
Yes, sir.
All right, I got kind of a weird question here. Because every time we talk about getting an officer, we talk about outfitting them with a car. Does every officer have to have one? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Chief Johnson, but, do officers ride together, or how many officers do we need on the road at any given time?
So one of the things that we do at public safety is we're police and fire. At all times, the officers are on call. If they don't have a emergency vehicle to drive, they're not going to respond to off-duty fire calls. And we depend on that in order to handle those emergency situations.
Okay, so it's different than a typical police department, and I understand what you say, and that's a great explanation. I wanted to ask it, but yeah, because I know they are also first responders and also firemen, which I don't know if a lot of people, they just see police officers. So, but yeah, they are a little bit of everything. So that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
When we had our, I think, mid-year planning meeting, I can't remember the projections because each department projected how many personnel they would need year by year. With this, I guess if we added this in, would we get to that level that you were projecting by saving the money with the grant, and then we can shift the funds from other areas?
We would still be behind.
You would still be behind. Okay.
Well, I think this would be pretty good because one of the main questions people ask you, with all of this growing in North Augusta, do we have enough police protection? And that has not been a question the last 2 years. That's been a question the last 20 years. And so, and I guess, Junior, the 3 you took away for the CAT, essentially that took away 3, am I right, 3 employees on that? And
yes, ma'am.
so you're short to me on that.
Yes, ma'am. We pulled those off of the ship, the line officers that answer calls each day. And what that did, it caused more work on the remaining members.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm for this.
I think I'll just second with what Mayor Williams said, though maybe a comparison between the ARPA funds would be helpful as we make the decision. for general comparison of ideas.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I am generally for this, but I would like to just see what the competing interests are just to understand that. But it would take a pretty important one to overcome this one to me.
Yep, I'm with you too, Kevin.
I think I understand the guidance, Mr. Mayor. So I believe that's our final slide. There it is. So that's our budget discussion. Obviously, you've all had a copy of the budget binder in your possession for some time now. Again, what I gave you was not a comprehensive, but that's really just an overview specifically of the general fund. What we really tried to do this year was understanding that we had rate increases associated with Horse Creek's rate change that affected our citizens for water and wastewater. And we tried to hold the line where we could in other areas. And so you see no millage increase, no property tax increase this year based on the budget that's presented. I think even with an addendum, we're still going to be able to hold the line without a property tax increase going into the fiscal year 2025.
Well, and I'm just going to buzz in on this. And I'm so thankful we don't have a millage increase. But I also remember those 25 years we bragged about, and that was one of the worst things as a city we did. So this is great, but whether I'm here or not the next 4 years, 5 years, please think on that it does look good. It says sitting up here on this council seat, say, hey, we're not raising no taxes, but then these departments are going to suffer. That's just for the future.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just suggest if y'all are satisfied with the budget presentation, that if you wanted to take a 3 to 5 minute break and then go right into debris clearance updates.
We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back. What? No.
No, I
All right, we are back, and now we're going to turn it over to Ms. Clifford for the City of North Augusta Hurricane Helene Recovery Update. 32.
It's a nice screensaver, which is not a hurricane. Feeling very tropical. All right, next slide, please. No changes to this slide. Main effort still debris removal. Next slide, please. So just training is repetition. So I know a number of our citizens have asked questions that we talked about during the update. So I'll just go over this very quickly, which is, hey, SCDOT's contractors are handling the state roads. And I'll show you a map that shows what are state roads versus what are city roads. We have some limited number of county roads that are inside the city limits that are covered under a separate Aiken County contract. We have city roads, which are under the same contractor, so SDR and Tetra Tech. And they actually started this past weekend, and I'll talk through that a little bit. Then we've got city crews working city roads, and I would tell you out of the group that's kind of up there on that slide, that's been the best effort we've had to date, which you'll see throughout slides. And then we've also got a mix of city and contract crews that are going to potentially work city parks and greenways. And part of what you all approved tonight was the R&R tree contract, which will potentially get after some of these items, or SDR, depending on what we get from a legal opine. And then we still want to encourage our residents to use the C&D landfill. Again, it doesn't cost them anything to use the landfill there, as long as they're just taking yard debris and whatnot. And they've got a North Augusta, South Carolina driver's license, no problem. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, again, city trees overhanging and falling on private property. And I know Jamie Paul, the city clerk, has received a number of calls from constituents about trees that are not city trees that are leaning over their properties. The city has no say or legal obligation between two private homeowners or residences about, if your tree is overhanging somebody else's property and has nothing to do with city property, that's between you and the other homeowner. The city is not going to be involved in mediating that dispute. That's really between you and or your insurance companies and your next door neighbor, so to speak. So the city is not going to be taking or tracking citizens that have trees that are overhanging other citizens' property lines. That's between those two citizens, not between the city itself. Next slide. So again, just to highlight, our city yard debris trucks are smaller than the double-decker size contracted trucks you're going to see that you already are seeing through both SCDOT and SDR that are operating here in town. And I've had some feedback already about like, well, hey, they skipped my pile. They're doing so because we want to get the most amount of residue yard debris picked up with our city trucks as we can. And if they risk it and they start picking up logs out of a pile and they bust the boom, they blow a hydraulic line, something else happens, that truck's deadline for at least a week. And so we're missing out on multiple days of pickups. So again, they're getting after yard debris piles that are done in accordance with what their assessment is about what they can pick up. And it also drives some of our strategy at the city staff level about which neighborhoods we're pushing city crews into versus others. Some of them are very heavy, and I'll show you on a map. For example, we've got a spot in Carsville that Tom Zeezer's crew through Streets and Drains were able to at least open up the road to a single passable lane there in the back of that neighborhood. City crews are not going to be able to, in any kind of form or fashion, be able to make improvements upon that road because of the size of the trees that are there that have to be hauled off. That is strictly going to be done through large contract crews through SDR. So that would be an example of a neighborhood where we are not going to put city crews on the ground to do anything there because it outstrips the capabilities of the equipment that our city crews have. Next slide. Again, just as no changes to this, but just to highlight, these are guidance points that I have issued to the staff, specifically to the folks who are involved in the debris pickup. Again, we are not covering Belvedere or Aiken or Edgefield County areas that are outside the city limits. We're not going to be doing normal yard debris routes. We're just doing debris pickup right now. We've got 2 dedicated full-time crews. They've been working 6 days a week. Again, that's voluntary overtime. So I'm out there on Sunday. Well, maybe they're doing 7. There you go. I'll cover that in the next slide or future slide. And again, roads are still a priority over the Greenway. And again, I appreciate the council being good about this. We're not whipsawing those crews around to different neighborhoods just because one constituent's asking for it. We're dealing with life, health, safety, and specifically the one area I can tell you that we've pulled crews or reassigned crews to is to provide pedestrian passability on sidewalks around the schools. Next slide, please. So again, just to rehash for everybody here, you can see very clearly the red and the blue on the screen or on your slide packet. Red roads are SCDOT roads. Blue roads are city roads. SCDOT has got about 75% of the road network inside the city limits, and city roads are about 25% of the city road network. And so I'll show you here on a future slide what's been done from the city crews perspective, but we've gotten a lot of penetration through some of the neighborhoods with city crews. And again, I've heard some things on Facebook about how come you went to this neighborhood that didn't have a lot of damage there, and that is a true statement. So, you know, we did go to Russian Waters and we did go to Gregory Landing. We did that for the very specific intent of we can get those neighborhoods knocked out fairly quickly, get the yard debris piles cleaned up with the equipment that we have, and then move on to the next set of neighborhoods and deal with those problems as they come up. But there are some neighborhoods, Savannah, Barony, the Rapids, that just the amount of debris in there and more importantly, the size of the debris is really beyond the ability of our crews to be able to handle. And Hammond Hills is also one of those neighborhoods that's largely SCDOT, and we did have SCDOT start to do at least a few of the roads in Hammond Hills, and I've got a call scheduled with some of the SCDOT leadership tomorrow to get some better fidelity on what their plan is specific to that neighborhood. Next slide, please.
We have not posted that on our public information page yet.
We have not. It's hard to see on the Facebook page. What we'll likely be doing is putting a page together, much like the Public Safety Headquarters project page, and putting a lot of our documentation on that page, and I suspect this will be on that page so people can see where it is.
But Jamie posts that on the city website, so somebody could pull that up, right?
You could.
Yeah, okay, good.
And I think this is a good map, not just a hurricane. People need to see how many state roads in North Augusta.
I know.
You know, because people say, why, my road needs it, well, it's a state road, so.
Well, Pat, I mean, you're over there, you're a city road, and right next to your neighbor is a state road.
No, do what?
My road's not even on here.
Torrey's a city road, and you got a state road next.
You're on a city road, Councilman.
I don't know. I don't see my road. Kevin, you see your
Well,
road?
mine's gone. I was,
Councilman Toole's also on a city road. So I've spent a great deal of time poring over these maps.
The next one you'll see, Pat, you'll see
okay, 'cause
you'll
I
see
didn't
it.
see.
I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Next slide, please. So again, as we talked about, this
Yeah,
is
right.
around North Augusta High School where you would have different rates of cleanups. Now, actually, it's interesting is that, you know, both SCDOT and city crews were working this within a week of each other, so you didn't see a huge gap in time between cleanup on some of these roads. But that would be an example of an area where you have city and state roads that are interspersed in the same neighborhood, and they would be picked up at different rates and different times. Next slide. Savannah Barony, another example. This is a county road and a private road and a city road, all in the same area. So the private roads being in gray, the yellow roads being county, and blue being city. And SDR just started doing pickup on Savannah Barony today with some of their trucks. Next slide. So as we talked about, our contracted plan for city roads with SDR and Tetra Tech is to start in Savannah Barony and work our way south. It's probably an inelegant design based on the arrow there, but really we're hitting neighborhoods right off of Martintown Road. So if their entrance is on Martintown Road, between Martintown Road and the river, we're hitting that neighborhood next. So it starts with Savannah Barony. That's going to take them some time. I drove through there today, and just the amount of debris that's through that neighborhood is significant, and that's probably, in my estimation, at least 3 or 4 double-decker trucks worth of stuff coming out of there just to get to the back of the neighborhood. And then they're going to move through the next neighborhood, which the name escapes me, is it starts with a C, and then, Chanticleer, and then it'll be the Rapids. And so that's how we're going to move those folks down through the stack, through those high-impact roads. Next slide. So this is a slide we got from SDR, and this is something I really would like to kind of highlight. I put this on the city's Facebook page today, but also for you as council members and for our citizens at home. And Councilman, this may get to your point about Tetra Tech being a monitoring company behind SDR. FEMA does not pay for contractor debris, for roof shingles, for refrigerators, for any number of things. They're strictly picking up yard debris, that's trees, roots, root systems, whatever else that's a resultant of the storm. And so I've already seen numerous piles throughout neighborhoods where there's metal grate fencing, there's contractor roofing parts or whatever, And I'm going to tell you that's at the discretion of the vendor, the contractor, but it's entirely possible they're going to skip that pile and move on to the next one. So I would really caution our residents from making sure that if they have regular debris versus yard debris, that those should be separated if at all possible, because I can't guarantee on day one when they roll through your neighborhood that if you've got metal grates laying on top of your tree debris, they may hop on top and throw them off, but if they look and see that it's all interspersed, they're likely just going to skip it and go to the next house because they're trying to make time and get through the neighborhood and get the most amount of debris picked up. Next slide, please. I briefed last week that this is what the city crews will be doing this week, and I was in serious error in underestimating Jason Sykes and the sanitation and streets and drainage team's work ethic. All those highlighted in green have already been picked up. Those are all completely done, and they're already moving on to the next set of priorities, which I'll talk through on a slide. But again, easier for us to get through the newer clear-cut neighborhoods based on the size of the trees there and the amount of debris. So they were able to make really good time through all of those neighborhoods and made some inroads into Bergen Place, not fully, and then I ended up pulling back off onto Gregory Landing, Gregory Landing off Gregory Lake Road because we briefed that was part of the priorities work. Next slide, please. And then also, as we talked about life, health, safety, these are two jobs that we asked our city crews to cease and desist on other jobs to get after. So they're on the left-hand side is an approach road to North Augusta Elementary. We have reports of debris that was on the sidewalk. I went out and verified that, and that was in fact the case. And just as importantly, it was debris that could be handled by our city crews. It wasn't, large pine trees that couldn't get picked up by our boom. It was something that we could do, and so we did it. Or Jason and his crew did it. And then this past weekend, as Councilman Buck alluded to, they're out there working on knob cones specifically to get after the sidewalk issues around Paul Knox Middle School. Next slide. This is probably a bit of an eye chart. You've got it in your presentation, but this shows all the city roads that our city crews have done. And if it's in green, it's completely done as far as we can tell. Now, I would caveat this with you've got something on there. Like, for example, if you had West Avenue on there, which I didn't see on this particular one, but West is a city street in some portions, and it's a SCDOT road in other portions. So when we're doing a street that has both city and SCDOT ownership, we're just doing the city portion of that road, not the SCDOT portion.
Now, Jim.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, I'm going to use my street, though, because it's been clean. But there's a lot of some stuff, like if you just raked your yard left over from the big piles, will that be picked up by a city truck later on?
I would hope the answer is yes, but right now we're...
Yeah, no rush on that, but some advance, that's right.
And then you can see there in yellow, there's a couple of streets there that, it says, have we been on there? Have we evaluated? And the answer is yes, but can we do something on it? The answer is no. That's not something that we're able to do with our city crews, with the boom trucks that we have. It's got to be done with SDR or someone else. Next slide, please. So these are the great thing about having a public safety department. They're also a reconnaissance arm. And so as they've been out, we asked through SCDOT, Senator Tom Young gave us an assist, and also I reached out to SCDOT leadership to see if we can move some of the crews out of the North Augusta High School area, specifically into Hammond Hills, as that's kind of our ground zero neighborhood. And to their credit, they did that starting on Friday. And so these are all pictures from both Hammond Hills and also Bahama Heights neighborhoods that are being serviced by contract crews from SCDOT. Next slide. So moving forward, what you see there on the very dark arrows, the black, the black ovals in the bottom, Bluff Avenue, on Riverside Boulevard, that's property maintenance with Roy Kibler's teams cleaning those areas up and chipping some items. So they're on Bluff Avenue today. They're going to do that for a period of time, probably a day or two, and then we're going to send them over to Riverside Boulevard. So even though that's a SCDOT road, it's going to take them a while to get to that, and we found some hazards. If you drive down Riverside Boulevard now, you're going to see an enormous tree limb that's just right out. Like if you just swerve this a little bit, you're going to take off your mirror. It's right there on the edge of the road. So Roy and his team, they're just going to trim down some of the protruding items. So they're not doing a full cleanup on that road. That's really for SCDOT to do, but they're just going to mitigate hazards on that road just to make it a little safer to drive down, which is good. And then in light black oval, if you will, at the bottom of the arrow, that's there on our downtown corridor. That's right near North Augusta Elementary School. So I showed you a picture earlier of our crews that clean the sidewalk. The neighborhood that's right there on Spring Oak Lane, there's a lot of moderate-sized debris piles, but most, not all, but most of those debris piles can be handled by city crews. They're out there today, or we're out there today working on those. That'll probably finish up tomorrow. Then they're going to move into Plaza Place Drive and the apartments there through the city road, handle portions of Woodlawn there behind the shopping plaza. And when they finish all those, then I'm going to move them up to the neighborhood right around Hammond Hill Elementary, and that's there on Bunting Drive. That goes Hammond Place. And so that's another one of those neighborhoods where not everything in that neighborhood can be gotten by city crews because some of the size of the logs are pretty sizable, but we can at least make a dent in that neighborhood there in Hammond Hills and get that cut down. So I think we could probably get about maybe 3/4 of the debris that's in that neighborhood, that one loop with the city crew. And so we're going to attempt to do that with that team. And then we're going to use a different crew is working there in Crestland. So they're across from Summerfield Park and over by North Augusta Middle School. Again, you see a number of blue roads there. A lot of big trees are in that neighborhood. So I can tell you right now, our city staff is not going to be able to fully handle those roads, but they are going to be able to get some of the debris down to a manageable level for the bigger stuff for SDR to come and do. And then if they're able to do that, then we're going to move south to the next street there, which I believe is Hillcrest Drive. And then we'll pick the next set of priorities. But we're meeting now twice a week. We meet Mondays and Thursdays. So we run an internal meeting for our crews for their priorities of work. And then we also do a county level meeting with Aiken County, also with City of Aiken, to talk through the overall priorities for the county. So we're getting 2 touch points a week to make sure our crews are, properly oriented, and then we'll move through the next set of priorities after that. But just wanted to let you know these are the next set of neighborhoods that city crews, not SCDOT and not SDR, will be working on. Next slide. And as a reminder, this is where citizens can go. We highly encourage people to do this. If they're tired of seeing the debris pile in the front yard, or if it's a smaller debris pile, and they can do it with a pickup truck and a small trailer, or if we have church groups that want to contribute, and we've had some good feedback right now from church organizations that want to help the infirmed or the elderly, and so we try to get them linked up with Kimona, the Community Ministries of North Augusta, to link those two elements up together, and that's where we ask people to take their debris. We are not allowing citizen drop-off at the contract sites that are here in the city. Again, that has to do with FEMA rules and what they're doing as far as their FEMA reimbursement. So this is the only place right now that citizens can take their yard debris. And again, that's at no charge other than just the cost of gas of getting it out there. Next slide. And just a reminder again, that's out kind of on the south, or north side, I should say, of Aiken Technical College. They're about 11 miles from City Hall. Next slide. And Kelly and I talked through this at the last meeting, so I won't belabor all of it. But again, if the city tree damages your personal property, it comes down on your shed, lands on your roof, does whatever else, that's a homeowner insurance claim, and that's your responsibility as a homeowner to get the tree at least out to the front yard so it can get picked up. If the city tree lands in your yard but doesn't damage it, again, the city's not going to be removing the tree on your city property. That's the homeowner to remove the tree. If it's leaning over your property, again, city tree being the operative word, not your neighbor's tree, not a private residence or a shopping mall's tree. It's a city tree that's leaning over your property. Then report it to our city clerk, Jamie Paul. And then the great thing about having a city arborist on staff is that Roy Kibler can go out there and he does this every day. He goes out there and he makes an evaluation of the tree about whether this is really a hazard, or whether, hey, that tree's going to be just fine just like it is and nothing needs to happen to it. But he does an assessment of every tree that's reported to us that's a city tree over private property. And then we take a stance on that about whether it needs to be removed or not. And then again, if you have a tree that fell onto city property, we're going to remove that tree, especially when you talk about easements, or it fell onto like a sewer easement or water line easement. We'll take care of the city portion of that, but we're not necessarily going to reach into your yard and take care of the tree on your yard. And again, if the city tree falls in your yard damaging city property, i.e., greenway fencing, then we're going to take the part of the tree that's on city property and we're going to repair the city property that is damaged. Next slide. No changes to our operation end state. And again, I'm not going to remove this slide mostly because I want you and our citizens to know, Every time I go up here and give a briefing, this will continue to be on here, and we'll just chip away at each of these requirements as we go forward until these are all done. Next slide. I'll pause for questions from the council.
Yes.
Can you have, next week, can we kind of start tracking to see what our reach and interactions is by social media with this information we're posting, since we're getting such good response on the front end with the power, you know? We need to start continue to drive people there. And I don't know if may have Chief, if might say this, I've had a number of folks call. Chief, you want to tell about the fact we're having the trunk or treat at Riverview Park Sunday, and it's after Halloween. People just need to realize that between that trunk or treat and there's a lot of activities out there. I mean,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could say and we're seeing this across a lot of municipalities and counties here in the CSRA as a whole, not just here in North Augusta, just that trick or treating. I mean, we can't prevent people from going out trick or treating, but we certainly wouldn't advise it. The amount of deadfall that's here throughout the city, we can't guarantee that all the sidewalks are going to be cleared and that people can go, from house to house, in the dark, trying to weave through the debris fields that are out there. So ultimately, trunk or treat events that are both before and after Halloween are really the best bet for our citizens to take their kids trick or treating. But with that, I'll turn it over to Chief to talk about their trunk or treat.
Yes, sir. Normally we do it early in October. It's a great outreach event for us. This year it got pushed back, obviously because of the hurricane, but we still wanted to do it so that we could help the kids out. And then looking back on it, like Mr. Clifford said, it's a great opportunity for you to take your kids somewhere. They can participate in trick or treating, and they can do it in a safe environment. And anybody who's going to trick or treat on Thursday night, normally you need to be extremely careful, but it's just more dangerous this year with the debris piles. The debris piles block light, which won't allow you to see the children that are walking. And we recommend make sure if you're a parent that you have a hold of your children's hands, no matter how old they are. You don't want them to get excited and run out from around a debris pile in front of a vehicle or something like that.
thanks for doing it.
Well, I know you can't say you're not going trick or treat, but can we just say, because a lot of people ask, can the city say no trick, which we tell them no, but that as a citizen or as a city, we recommend you don't.
Councilwoman, I would say that we likely will schedule a post, I think both through the public safety Facebook page and also the city Facebook page about the trunk or treat event and say, hey, we would recommend that in lieu of trick or treating on Thursday, which we view as a high risk event, that you do a trunk or treat event, whether it's ours or somebody else's.
Yeah, and one more question. With the trucks, like on my street, this one lady she's got 2 huge trees down. But she's waiting on her insurance adjuster, so she can't have the trees cut down. Will they make another round on these streets? Because I don't know what she'll do with it once she cuts the tree, unless the company itself takes it away. But,
I don't have a good answer for you today, Councilman.
So we don't know if they're making a second round.
I don't know that because I think, especially where you live, being an SCDOT road, I don't know what their current plan is, whether they're doing one pass or multiple passes. But I'll certainly bring that up with the SCDOT website I talked to.
I've heard the rumor. A lot of people ask me. I said, well, I don't know. They said, oh yeah, they're going to make 2 rounds. So I don't know where that rumor got started.
And Ms. Pat, remember too, if they're hiring a company to come put it up, I mean, it's always been the city's thing that they need to dispose of it.
But this is part of the hurricane, and she can't get her adjuster to come out. He came out, but haven't given an answer yet. So she's still part of the hurricane.
Any other questions? Are you finished on your end? Yes, sir. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I think we're all getting those kind of questions, and all I always tell people is just please be patient a little bit. Just be patient, and everybody's working really hard. So.
I'm gonna tell you, 27 roads cleared in a week. Somebody made a real nice comment about we can't clean roads, we can have JLJ. Well, we had JLJ within 27 roads. We got. I tell you, this plan is. It's only been a week, but I think we're making progress. So we're ahead of the game. Thank you. All right, nothing else, and we stand adjourned. Have a good evening.